Okay, now just in case you're looking at this thinking, wow, that looks like a real watercolour. Well, actually it is. I painted this for my wife one Valentine's Day, and the writing on the side of the pen that said waterproof ink, they were lying because, well, you can see some of the writing smudged. But the important thing was she loved it and she was happy with me for minutes. So I will take that as a win. Now you can see, because I've got my layers panel open, this is just a photo that I took and I brought it straight into Procreate. It's all on one layer. Look, if I make my background invisible, you can see no change. That's all paper, flowers, writing, all on one layer. And I want to use this to show you a couple of brushes plus one of the palettes that comes with the studio. So I will come to my paintbrushes. I will come to blend and glaze. If you remember, we were talking about that. I'm going to come to DC Color Glazer. And just to give a before and after, I'm going to swipe to the left. I'm going to duplicate. I'm going to draw on the duplicate layer. I am also going to choose a color. Now I'll come down to palettes, and you can see I've got the various palettes here which come with the studio. Now where is it? DC Tints 01 and DC Tints 02. Now which one do I want to try? Let's try the one I'm circling. Tap on that. My Color Glazer brush is selected. My opacity is set low, 25%. In fact, no, what I'll do is I'll crank this right the way up. My brush size is fairly large, and I'm going to show you exactly what this does. You see that? It changes the color of everything to the color I've got selected. But interestingly, it doesn't change the dark to light. If that had been most other brushes, I would have simply painted an area of blue over that rose. That didn't happen. And the point of this brush, if I just two-finger tap to undo, is that it lets you take some existing paint and add a different color tint to that area, but you're not affecting the dark and light of stuff underneath. This is actually very useful. If you've ever done oil painting, this is glazing. In this case, you apply a glaze of blue over, in this case, the rose. But the trick is you keep your opacity way low. Now, what have I got here? Okay, let's try 25%. And instead of just scrubbing away, I want to add a little bit of cool to the shadows. Let's come back. I want something a little bit more cyan-y. So I'll try the blue next to it. And let's make my brush a little bit smaller. It sets 25%. I don't try and do it all in one go. I gradually build up the effect as I go along. Even on 25%, after only a few brush strokes, I'm getting some quite strong changes where I want it. And in this case, it's the shadow areas. And that is cooling down some of the darker areas. Now, just for the sake of argument, supposing I wanted to warm up some of the lighter areas. Come to my palette again. I'm on DC Tint 02. Let's try a cool yellow or a warm yellow. Let's try a warm yellow, because I think a cool yellow might clash a little bit with what's underneath. Again, set to 25%. I'm going to come to just certain areas. I'm only, well, you can see my brush stroke. I'm only applying a few strokes at a time, just in certain areas, but it is making a difference. And in case you're wondering, I'm applying a light color like yellow to a light area. Well, no, I could apply it in the shadow areas as well. Hopefully you could see that. But let's take a look at a before and after. So I'll move this off to one side, make it a little bit bigger. I was working on my duplicate layer. If I make it invisible so I can see the original picture, you see that? Now I can apply different color tints directly to my picture without worrying about destroying the dark to light values underneath. And I do find that useful because, well, look, when I was painting this flower, I got to a certain stage on February the 13th, and I was thinking, well, I wouldn't mind applying some cool paint into the shadow areas, but it was so close to February the 14th that I was worried I was going to mess things up. And so I ended up with something that was basically dark to light variations of the same pigment. I wouldn't have minded experimenting more, but I can do that with this. Okay. I am going to choose my original layer. I'm going to duplicate again. I'm going to make that top layer invisible because I want to start again, but this time, instead of using the color glazer, I'm going to use the overlay glazer This one works in a similar way, but it adds something extra. If I come to, what was I using? That blue, slightly cyany blue color, I'm going to use a darker version. My opacity, I'm going to set down way low again, 25%. In fact, look, I'm going to make it even lower, 10%. My brush size, let's make it, well, you can see it jiggling around here. And now I'm going to start painting in certain areas. Now, the difference with this brush is it will affect the color, but as you can see, it's also affecting the dark to light values. If you paint with a deep blue, you're going to get a blue cast in the shadows, but you're going to get a deeper, darker values. Look, if I crank this right the way up, see that? Looking really rather dark. And undo that, so let's take that back down there. On the other hand, supposing I choose a very light yellow, I'm going to make my brush size quite a bit smaller, and I'm going to... Now, can you see this? As I'm doing this, I can add lighter streaks which have a yellow tone to them. Let's make that even smaller. And I can start to draw the lighter veins in this rose petal. They're still keeping the yellow color cast, but also, like I say, things are getting lighter. That is the difference between the Overlay Glazer brush and the Color Glazer brush. The Color Glazer adds a glaze, doesn't affect the dark and light. The Overlay Glazer, it changes the color, but it also affects the dark to light values. And these are designed to work in conjunction with DC Tints 01 and DC Tints 02. DC Tints 01, these are the kind of tints I would use if I'm doing portraits, for example, or life studies. So I can warm up certain areas, I can cool down certain areas. And when you do that, it becomes really good at helping you out with something called reflected light. You get your main light source, that can be what? Sunlight, light coming through a window on a cloudy day. It can be candlelight, so you can get cool and warm light. But then the reflected light, that's the light which bounces off anything that's around you. So you could have warm light coming in through a window, bouncing off a blue wall, and so you get cooler shadows with warmer highlights. And doing that with painting has been a mission for countless artists through the ages. But with this, supposing I want some more neutral shadows, so I'll choose the grey, Overlay Glazer, make the brush larger. I'm working really fast here, I really am. I can just cool down areas and deepen the shadows. Or I can add just a little bit of warmth to the highlight areas. Okay, I'm on 50% here. I wanted to show you this fairly quickly, but it's, well, look at the difference it's making. This is a bit quicker than I would normally work, but it seems to be working in general. Just go with it. All right, let's take a look at the before and after with this one. That's the file I've got after just a few brush strokes using the Color Glazer or the Overlay Glazer. Now the final thing I want to say with this, if I make that invisible, I'm going to create a new layer. Let's just put it to the top so it looks easier. If I come to that little end which I'm circling now and I tap on it, these are all the various different layer blend modes. And actually there is one called, well, there's two I want you to look at. One is called Color. Now with color, I could choose any brush I want. Let's try Crunchy Smudge, choose a blue color, opacity up, and it's the same effect, but this time round, if I go into my eraser, I'll just click and hold so I have the same eraser. I can also erase where I want. So I have more flexibility there. Let's 3-finger swipe down, clear my layer, or I can come and set the layer to overlay blend mode. Now, if I choose a light blue, any paintbrush I want, it'll make things lighter and put in a color tint, or it can make it mid-tone, put in a color tint, or I can make it darker and put in a color tone, and again I can just erase that wherever I want that. So if I have that greater flexibility by adding an extra layer and setting the layer blend mode, why would I bother with the Color Glazer and the Overlay Glazer? Well, the reason is not technical. The reason is the way your mind works. One of the reasons that learners get frustrated or sometimes even annoyed with digital art is that, come on, you know the feeling. You're just painting and you're seeing this amazing thing come to life just from the end of your pencil or your paintbrush. You're in that zone, the creative zone. And nothing gets you out of that zone quicker than having to think about the technicalities of a digital art program like, oh, hang on, I've got to come back to my layers panel and I've got to create a new layer and I've got to tap on the end and I've got to come down to, oh, color, there we are, okay, and then I can choose any other paintbrush. And by the time you get back to painting, you're not in that creative zone anymore. You just have to go into the technical zone of your brain. So these two brushes, color and overlay, combined with, in my case, DC Tint 01 or DC Tint 02, this helps me to stay in that creative zone. And I just like doing it that way. Even though I've been using digital art programs for decades now, I want to stay in my creative zone. And these two brushes, Color Glazer and Overlay Glazer, help me to do that. I just have to paint on the layer I'm on. I don't have to think technical thoughts. Okay, those are those two brushes. I hope you get a lot of use out of them.